Hey, my name is Shovel, and today I've got my 2015 Ram 1500 inside the garage to do some routine maintenance, and I figured since it's in here, we could talk about how it's built, what's unique about the regular cabs, and whatever else I think might be of interest to folks, since they don't make these anymore. If you're shopping for one, if you just were always curious about them and thought they were cool, let's take a look. Well, hopefully you don't find the wide-angle lens distortion too distracting, but it's the only way to get the whole thing in frame, so you're gonna have to just deal with that. I bought this thing brand new from the lot in 2015, so I've had it for the better part of 10 years at this point. So first, let's talk about how this truck is spec'd out from the factory. I didn't specify this truck. This is actually a U.S. Forest Service truck. I did buy it brand new, but the Forest Service had originally ordered it, and they just didn't pick it up from the dealership, and so the dealership was offering it for a price I could not say no to, and it happened to be built almost exactly the way that I would have built it anyways. It's got the Hemi engine, it's got the 6-speed transmission, it's got the conventional part-time four-wheel drive system, it's got the limited slip in the rear end, and it's got the heavy tow package. Aside from that, there's really not a whole lot of other options. It's a basic tradesman trim, but as you can see, I've done a couple things here and there to it to make it more suited to my personal use. One thing that is really unique about the Forest Service specification on this is something that I'm not even sure you could have ordered if you wanted it. There's no power locks and there's no power windows, meaning there's no push button to unlock the door. It's all manual. There's also no power windows inside here. It's all manual. This doesn't bother me on the driver's side, although on the passenger side, it is pretty far to lean over. If I've got to put the thing in park, if I want to safely lean all the way over and roll that down, which, you know, if I'm already on the highway and I want to have some cool breeze in my hair, well, I don't really have all that much hair, but if I want a cool breeze, I got to come to a stop if I want to put that window down. Since it is the tradesman trim, it has the hard plastic everywhere, which I know a lot of people harp on, but this thing's been used as a truck its whole life. It gets muddy, it gets dirty, it gets used while I'm wearing dirty clothes, it gets used while I've been out, you know, getting greasy and whatever, and it just wipes off. So this thing looks really nice and clean, and it's taken no special maintenance to keep it all nice like that. I'm not really the kind of person who needs to be pampered, and this is no shade on you. If you like to be surrounded by cushy stuff, make yourself happy by whatever means you want to, but I'm kind of a rough dude, so like the plastics in there, it's just not an issue to me. It's not even something I think about. I like the fact that they're durable and I can wipe them off real easy. That's a bigger deal to me. If it was made out of some kind of nice plush material, but then it got ripped the first time I dragged, like, you know, my clothing or something over it, it kind of pissed me off. I did go for the dealer option, like heavy vinyl floor mats. Those are awesome. Absolutely recommend those. They are perfectly fitted and they work really well. Whenever I got the muddiest ass boots in there, I could just stomp in there and then just hose them out. Couldn't be easier. This thing does have cloth seats, and from day one, I've put these cloth seat covers on it. So these things have been on it for, you know, roughly 9.5 years at this point, out in the sun. They're getting a little bit faded. You know, there's a little bit of color kind of sun faded out because I lived in Arizona when I bought this thing. But overall, they've held up really well. A little bit of wear and tear here. Now, this, of course, is not a review on these seat covers, but I'm just saying that, you know, putting nice quality fitted seat covers on a vehicle when it's brand new means that the seat underneath it is going to be absolutely flawless. Since this has the bench seat, this, of course, flips up, and so you've got the so-called BI itch seat that sits right there in the middle. It's okay. Like, it's comfortable enough that there's no problem going across town, and if you're like, you know, 3 people who don't love each other, you can sit far enough apart that you're not feeling super intimate. I wouldn't cross the country in that middle seat, though. Another thing that's kind of a drawback, I guess you could say, with the single cabs is that you can't recline the seats. So if you are on a long road trip, you can't just recline the passenger seat and sleep in there while someone else drives. And of course, if you're stopped along the side of the road because you got to wait for something and you want to take a nap, you better take a nap sitting up. Now, if you're a shorter person and you can sleep side to side on this thing, more power to you. I'm 6'1". It just doesn't work for me. I've tried bunching up clothing on one side and kind of sticking my feet out the window on this side, and you know, it's not that great. Thankfully, it does have the 6-foot bed, so I can sleep in the back there pretty comfortably if I need to. Now, I got this thing here because I figured it might be useful for someone to know a few dimensions that are not totally obvious. So often when we're on a road trip, we'll stick an ice chest right back there. And that's a great place to stick a couple cold sodas, or if you have medicine that needs to be refrigerated or something like that, it fits right there. And I'm just going to go ahead and measure for you real quick how much space you have. So width-wise, we're looking at about 16 inches plus. And depth-wise, we're looking at about 11 inches, give or take. Behind the seat, you've got this little package tray right here. And I just keep toolkit and a shovel and a few other just random things back here, you know, first aid kit, etc. This thing here is a plastic piece, and the depth on that down in the bottom is roughly 8 inches or so. Behind the seat, there's also these grocery hooks, and these are great for hanging plastic grocery bags because the bag will hang and then just sit on top of the bottom here and not roll around or whatever. Or if you've got a purse or if you've got a satchel or whatever you call a bag that you carry around, you can hang it off these guys here and they won't just flap around all over the place. There's also a sliding window. which that can be operated from the driver's seat. It's not powered, obviously, but it doesn't need to be because it's right there. Let's take a look at the cockpit. Starting from the top, it would be hard not to notice I've got this Garmin nav unit here. This nav unit has a front-mounted dash cam, so it's always recording forward whatever's going on the road in front of me to an SD card. It also has a reversing camera, so when I put this thing in reverse, it switches to a reverse camera, and I can see whatever's going on behind the vehicle. Additionally, if I don't have it in reverse and I enable this little auxiliary button down here, it turns on a forward-mounted camera that allows me to see what's going on in front of the vehicle so I can park more easily. It's kind of blown out right now. I'm not sure I can give you a better view of it. And of course, from where the camera is mounted, it looks like it obscures the entire windshield. But I assure you, from where I sit up here, let's go ahead and just take a look at it. From where I sit up here in the driver's seat, as you can see, it's only obscuring my view of the dashboard and part of the hood. That's it. It doesn't obscure my view out the front of the vehicle at all. I stuck this thing in like 2015, so now it's a bit dated, but it continues to work awesome, so I haven't seen a need to update it to anything newer. If I want to use my phone, of course, I can still stick my phone on this magnet mount right here, so I can have Google Maps or whatever kind of maps I feel like using over here. You can see that down here, since this is the Tradesman trim, it didn't have a big old touchscreen radio, so I stuck a knobs and buttons radio right here that has Bluetooth and plays USB, and it also plays CDs if I happen to want to. And so I can play whatever I feel like playing on this thing here, and I can just reach over and adjust it and do whatever I want to do with it without taking my eyes off the road. And I prefer knobs and buttons for that reason. I'm not a big fan of touchscreens in the vehicle. I just find them to be a distraction, and they don't really make life any better. You do need to have a touchscreen for modern interfaces. I just don't like it for primary control. Down below that, this thing has 3-knob climate control, which I think is the pinnacle of user interface. Again, it can be operated by touch without looking away from the road. And it's got every function you realistically need. How hard does the air blow? What temperature does it blow? And where does it blow? What else do you really need? Below that, I've added the trailer brake controller. This is the factory style trailer brake controller, and it is integrated with the vehicle. So it integrates with the little screen up here, and I can tell it what type of trailer I'm pulling, and I can do all the stuff I want to do as if it was there from the factory because, well, it might as well have been. I've also got these aftermarket upfitter buttons. So for example, this one here arms the forward driving lights. And this one here we already talked about is what turns on the camera in the front for parking in tight areas. The other 3 ones, I haven't figured out what I want to do with them yet. They don't have any particular function. And below that, of course, it's got the burrito tray. Since this has the part-time transfer case, I've got 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive lock, and 4-wheel drive low lock. And I know there's a fair amount of debate or discussion on the internet about which transmission is better, the 8-speed or the 6-speed. The 8-speed is a better transmission, hands down, no argument. The 8-speed is a better transmission, but that doesn't mean the 6-speed is a bad transmission. It's a perfectly good transmission. The only way you break them is if you neglect them, abuse them, or do something to make your engine make a shit ton more power, and then you blow it up because they're kind of only rated for what the engine makes stock. Inside the center console, I've got a bunch of junk, but I've also got a USB outlet, and I've also got a 3.5 millimeter, and I've got a 12-volt outlet way over here. The interesting thing with this guy here is that this actually ties in with that head unit. So even though that's an aftermarket head unit, this is a separate aftermarket piece that ties that USB in here with that. So I can charge a phone or whatever I want to inside here, or I could even stuff a thumb drive in there and play music in there, which I can't say I've ever done because there's also a thumb drive inlet right there and Bluetooth. But if I wanted to, I sure could. There's also a 12-volt here and a 12-volt there. I suppose that's pretty much it for the inside. Let's take a look at the outside. Hard to miss that I've got kind of an interesting bumper up here. This bumper was made by ICI out of Glendale, Arizona, and you can see that it's a real low profile thing. It doesn't stick forward very far. It's also got this big steel bash plate on the front of it there, and that meshes up pretty nicely with the factory skid plates. Underneath here, I added the skid plates from the Outdoorsman package. So I've got the one for the electric power steering, I've got the one for the front differential, and I've got the one for the transfer case back there. And so those things have protected my bacon a few times when I was off-road, kind of dragged them across some rocks. And I've repainted them since then because I didn't want them to rust. But if they protected me from damage one time, they have paid for themselves in my opinion. I also added the recovery hooks because those were not included in the factory build, but these have certainly come in handy a few times when I had to pull stuff or get pulled myself. In the suspension department up front, I've got Bilstein 5100 shocks, and I've got Eibach Pro Lift springs, and these are lifting me a net about 1.5 inches over stock. In back, there's actually a few different things going on. I've got the Eibach Pro Lift springs. Those are giving me about 2 inches of total lift. I've also got Bilstein 5100 shocks, which you can't really see very well from here. I've got longer sway bar end links. These guys here just return the sway bar to its neutral position with the new ride height. And I've got a drop track bar bracket that makes the track bar sit nice and level at static ride height, and that means that the back end doesn't jimmy around when I go over expansion joints or other bumps in the road. Since I use this truck to cross the continent on a fairly routine basis, it had to be good at everything, no compromises. So that means it has to be competent off-road. It also has to be really good at going 12, 13, 14, 15 plus hours on the highway without making me fatigued or tired. And that meant the suspension had to be really settled for highway driving while still being able to hit those secondary roads and dirt roads and not beat me up too bad. So that's what I've done to build the suspension the way that it is there. These are Continental TerrainContact. They're 285/70R17. These tires are immortal. They will last until the heat death of the universe. And I love them, except that they are useless on ice and snow. They're good at everything else in the entire universe. I would absolutely endorse this for someone who lives in Arizona. In fact, I bought these when I lived in Arizona. But now that I live somewhere that gets 4 seasons, at some point I'm going to have to replace these before they actually wear out, because they are completely useless when it comes to ice and snow. Great job on everything else, Continental. These are fantastic Arizona or California or whatever tires, Texas tires, absolutely awesome. But yeah, not so good. Not so good if you got winter. These wheels are off a 2003 Ram 1500. There was no modifications or anything like that to install them. They're 17x8. They just bolted on like they were made for the truck, because they were made for a previous generation of the truck. And you'll also notice I've got centromatics in there. If you don't know what centromatics are, they are automatic balancers, so they balance the wheel all the time as I drive. They've got little weights inside of them. You can just Google up centromatic if you're curious about them. They officially don't make centromatics for this truck, but as you can see, I have them, so that settles that. In back, I've got a tonneau cover. This one's made by Tiger. This thing's lasted a real long time and is exhibiting no wear, so I would completely buy that one again. I have some junk inside the trunk. Don't worry too much about this. It's an old desk I got to take to the dump because it won't fit in my garbage can. But this is a 6.5 foot long bed. I have slept in there many times. I'm 6'1" and I can sleep full length in there. I can put a futon mattress in it, or I can put an inflatable mattress. Totally comfortable. Obviously, I wouldn't do that underneath here unless I was doing some severe stealth camping. But you'll notice right up there, I've got a soft topper. And that soft topper just goes on here and is a soft topper. So that's kind of a cool addition as well. Totally don't regret it. Under the hood, yeah, it's pretty much stock. 395 horsepower is totally fine. I have no problem with the amount of power this thing makes. I've had no problem with the Hemi. It does exactly what it says on the box. It has not exhibited any kind of failures or faults or anything of that nature. That thing just plain works. Something to consider about power, since this is the regular cab short bed tradesman trim, is it weighs a solid 20% less than your typical Ram 1500 does, because it doesn't have all that extra metal and glass to haul around. It doesn't have all the extra luxuries and power seats and all that kind of stuff like that. And so it scoots pretty good on the stock power, which is why I haven't felt like I need to fool around with it, make it less reliable, make it drink more gas. Why mess with that stuff? It makes plenty of power for me. And of course, since everything else on it is built the same as all the other Rams are, that means since it weighs 20% less, all the other parts are kind of 20% overbuilt, which that doesn't suck. One more thing I wanted to show you in back though. Even though it's got the Hemi, it's got a single side exhaust on it instead of the dual exhaust sticking out the back. And that means that if I'm pulling a trailer, I'm not blasting the trailer with the exhaust. The exhaust on this thing is super quiet, and I like that. I'm not the kind of person who wants to have a loud exhaust. That's just me. I know that's something that a lot of other people prefer to have super loud. That's fine. I don't hate you for it. But I prefer a quiet exhaust, and this thing is dead silent on the highway. So, closing thoughts, since I've had this thing for almost 10 years at this point. When I first got it, my wife and I were recently married, and a lot of people kept on asking us, hey, what if you have kids? What if you have kids? First, that's a rude question to ask. Honestly, none of their damn business. Second thing on that is, if we were going to have kids, we would probably have approximately 9 months of notice, give or take on that, and I could just trade it for a different vehicle. Not really a big deal. So that's not really a consideration. Now, we're not able to have kids medically. Again, not anyone's business. We just can't have kids. And so kids were never going to be coming along. It was never a consideration for us. I actually think it's a little weird that these trucks are so unpopular, because if you've got like same-sex couples, those don't tend to result in children anyways. You've got people who are empty nesters, but they're still active and doing stuff. You've got like dudes just, living their own life, and ladies just living their own life, not making families. Why wouldn't you have a regular cab truck? Like, why do you want to haul all that extra glass and metal around everywhere you go? This fits clearly inside of my garage, which is awesome. It's not too tall. It's not too long. So I actually think it's kind of weird. Like, people buy Corvettes that have 2 seats. People buy Miatas. People buy motorcycles. No one thinks any of those things are weird. But when you get a truck with just 2 doors, everyone kind of freaks out. And I don't get that. So a lot of people have kind of offered their opinion that this is impractical, and I'm the guy owning it. It's not impractical. It does everything I want. Really, the only thing that ever becomes inconvenient about having the 2 doors is not being able to recline the passenger seat on a road trip. That's kind of it. Other than that, it's awesome. So thanks for watching. I hope you had a good time.